recently we just got a scene from Velma where they're making fun of adults who watch cartoons, and it just made me irate.
You know what 420 is, right?
Yeah, it's code for adults who still watch cartoons. Now, have you...
Time and time again, Hollywood keeps trying to make these assumptions that if you're an adult that likes cartoons, there must be something wrong with you. Well, I'm here to disprove that myth, because I just watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and I have very strong opinions about it. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is a must-watch for anyone who just loves a good story regardless of it being animated. This movie tackles mature themes, complex emotions, and intricate storylines that are enjoyable for people of all ages. So if you're ready to discover why this little film isn't just for kids, then keep watching. Up next. The story starts off with Puss celebrating his birthday at a big party. The point of this party is to establish two things. Number one, Puss is known as a living legend around town. And number two, he very much enjoys that. People are feeding into his ego big time, which will be important for the story later. But the party gets out of hand and wakes a sleeping giant, which Puss then goes to fight. And right off the bat, we have our very first example of just how great this movie truly is. As Puss and the Giant are fighting, Puss is animated in 24 frames per second, while the monster is animated in 12 frames per second. The fluidity of Puss's motions compared to the Giant's make him seem super capable and strong. Make no mistake, this was done on purpose. Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse did something very similar, where they gave Miles a lower frame rate than the older Peter Parker to show that he was inexperienced and still awkward in his body compared to a more experienced Spider-Man.
They could make Miles seem fast or skilled in some shots, on ones, and struggle in others, on twos. When they're swinging through the forest, Miles is on twos because he's clumsy, while Peter B. Parker is on ones because he's more skilled. This subtly helped illustrate how Miles was slowly becoming more comfortable with his powers.
And this film does a very similar thing with Puss. They animate Puss in 24 frames per second whenever he's super confident, but anytime his confidence drops or he gets afraid or nervous, they start animating him in 12 frames per second, which you will see later. On top of that, the animation is explosive and creative. They mix multiple different art styles to a great effect. For example, as Puss moves, you can see little comic-style lines that emphasize his movements, just like you would see in Spiderverse. There are also certain shots that looked like matte paintings, and other shots where you can see that the 3D animation is being mixed with 2D animation, and it all comes together in a beautiful way, just to tell the story through the visual medium of the art form, without even having to say a word. This movie takes what Spiderverse did successfully and really innovates on it, and that's why I think this film looks so incredible. It's definitely a step up animation-wise from the first Puss in Boots film. But the fight does not go as expected, as Puss is actually killed when a falling piece of debris falls on him, and he wakes up in a doctor's office, who explains to him that he has died, and that he is now on his 9th life, and that this is his last life to live, and he won't have any more chances. This scene is another great way of how this film uses animation to tell the story without words, because right away, before Puss even says anything, we can already tell that when he wakes up in the doctor's office, something's off. And that's because of the color palette. The entire room in the doctor's office is full of cool colors, lots of blues, and then you have Puss himself, who's the one puff of warmth in the whole room. This adds to the disorientating feeling that Puss feels as his world comes crashing down as he finally comes to terms with his own mortality. So we're already dealing with really heavy themes like fearing death, which is not exactly something kids really think about all too often. This is one of the many reasons why I think this film probably appeals more to an older crowd than it does to kids. Later we see Puss at the bar, which is also another adult activity. This is when he comes across the big bad wolf, who's a bounty hunter that wants him dead. Normally when Puss meets a villain, he's very confident. And as I mentioned before, he's animated in 24 frames per second. But now that Puss is fearing for his own mortality, the movie takes a moment to drop his frame rate down to 12 frames per second, to show just how uncoordinated and awkward he feels now that he's afraid, and he doesn't come across as confident as he used to be. Puss then runs away from the bar and heads to go live with a cat lady in the woods, to go live a domesticated life where he'll be looked after and safe, so he knows he won't die. But he's miserable at this lady's house. He's treated like a baby, he's not given much autonomy or independence, he's given an embarrassing name called Pickles, and he's pretty much lobotomized. Like, he doesn't really do anything, he just lives a very safe, boring domestic life. It's at this moment that I realize this could easily be a metaphor for an older person who has lived past their prime and is now in a retirement home, because that is essentially where Puss is now. This cat lady's house is his retirement home, and he has lived past his golden years of crime fighting and being a legend and is now just waiting to die. Again, these are themes that are going to appeal more to adults than kids. Kids might enjoy this movie just because they like the funny cats and some of the silly gags, but at the heart of the story is actually really sad. Puss feels that he has lived past his usefulness and can no longer be the hero he wants to be, and becomes depressed because of it. He even buries his clothes in a grave and says that his old self is officially dead. I mean, these are pretty dark themes for a kids movie. While Puss is at the cat lady's house, he meets a dog pretending to be a cat so that he can have a home. This dog is the opposite of everything Puss is. Where Puss in Boots is jaded on the world, ready to give up, this dog has an optimistic viewpoint on life and spins everything into a positive. It's great writing to introduce this kind of a character because he's a great foil for our main characters. He provides a much needed levity that the main characters just can't provide. His positivity makes Puss's negativity even more apparent. Meanwhile, Goldilocks and her three bears are looking for Puss because they need someone to go on a heist for them to steal a map to find a wishing star, a star that will grant anyone just one wish that they desire. We don't yet know what Goldilocks wants to wish for, but we can already tell that there's something off, since this is a woman who seems incredibly isolated and only talks to bears. She doesn't really interact with other humans other than our main characters. Puss overhears Goldilocks' plans to steal the map from a man named Jack Horner, and he decides to go after the map himself so that he can wish for 9 more lives and become the legend of Puss in Boots again. Puss and the dog Perito make their way over to James Horner's pie workshop where they attempt to steal the map to the wishing star. It is here that Puss runs into Kitty, an old flame from the first movie in case you forgot. Kitty was hired to steal the map as well, but she actually wants it for herself because she has her own wish that she wants granted. These two cats have a very real and adult relationship, especially for a kids movie. You can see that even just by how they interact with each other that they seem familiar but hesitant because of the issues with their relationship. They are written like a real couple with real issues, and you don't often see that a lot, even in adult movies. But alas, mid-heist, Goldilocks and her three bears arrive and crash the party, alerting James to what's going on, and they move to chase after them. As Puss, Kitty, Perito, Goldilocks and her three bears are running away, James sends his goons after them and literally throws fire arrows at them in the process. These action sequences are filled with real drama and real tension. The stakes actually seem genuinely high since the violence in this film feels very real compared to, say, a Disney movie where their action scenes are pretty much very tame in comparison. With Puss in Boots action scenes, you actually feel like the characters are in real danger. This just shows you that you can do a movie for all ages that has genuine stakes. You don't have to completely infantilize everything just because kids are gonna watch it. As our group gets away, there's a pretty cool montage just showing how everyone's chasing after each other. It's moments like these where the movie just takes a moment to show you the beauty of animation. Just a really cool, beautiful montage. The map then brings them to a portal, which leads to a dark forest where the wishing star fell. Each time a different character touches the map, the world they're in changes to reflect the different obstacles that they face in their real life. This film starts to get real meta and real deep real fast. For example, when Puss touches the map, he gets a number of obstacles that are all about him fearing death, but when Kitty touches the map, she gets a lot of obstacles about fearing being alone. Interestingly, when Perito touches the map, it turns into a kid-like wonderland since he doesn't really have any demons that he's dealing with. Thinking that his map isn't dangerous, Kitty and Puss let Perito hold the map, except his map is only not dangerous when you have the mindset that Perito has. For example, the first obstacle on his map is called the Pocket Full of Posies. They seem innocent at first, but if you try to attack them, they will attack back. The only way to get through this obstacle is to literally stop and smell the roses. This scene harps on one of the main themes of this movie, which is just to appreciate what you have in front of you. The only way to get around this obstacle is to change their perspective. And I think that's actually a really clever way of storytelling something that is dealing with very adult themes that might fly over the head of a young kid. The bright colors and silly doodads in this space will keep them entertained, but the adults will get the deeper meaning of it. And that's why this film is meant for everyone. It's here that we even learn that Perrito has a tragic backstory, and that his previous owners tried to drown him in a river. But not even that phases him. This is a pretty stark contrast to Jack, who also tried to explain that he has this sad backstory that he wasn't given the attention he wanted as a kid. But seeing how Perrito was still this happy-go-lucky dog despite having a much sadder backstory, I think is what really shows how Jack's actions are just because of Jack being a jerk and not because of his tragic backstory. In fact, Jack refuses to change his behavior at all and pulls out a phoenix from his Mary Poppins bag and sets a flame to the pocket of posies. He even pulls out a knockoff Jiminy Cricket from his bag who's supposed to be his conscience, and even the cricket's like, dude, you're just irredeemable. I just think that's funny. Later, we get to understand a bit more about why Kitty is there in the first place and why she wants the wishing star. And it's at this moment that you can really feel her loneliness. She says that it's better to be alone, yet when she touched the map, we saw that her greatest fears were being alone. So she's lying to herself about this. And it's this sort of cognitive dissonance that I think, again, will probably appeal more to adults than kids, because I'm sure this is a very familiar feeling for a lot of adults out there. Jack then pulls up and threatens Perrito. Meanwhile, Goldie and her 3 bears show up and go after the map. Meanwhile, the big bad wolf shows up again, since he's been following Puss this whole time, and this, again, is what makes Puss's frame rate drop. All of this is too much for him, and he runs away into the forest, fearful for his life. This allows Goldie to get the map. It's right after this scene that we get Puss having a panic attack over having faced his own mortality, and it's again moments like this where I'm like, how is this movie considered just a children's film? This is clearly meant also for adults who need to work out some things. I'd also like to point out that this movie does panic attacks a great service by actually portraying them well. Again, in Velma, when she had a panic attack, the show played it off as a joke, and that show is supposed to be for adults. So it's funny to me how this movie, that's supposedly a kid's film, is handling this with a lot more maturity than the so-called adult animated show, which just shows you again that animation is a medium and not a genre. It's in this moment that Perrito also learns that Puss and Kitty almost got married, except Puss literally left Kitty at the altar. Again, this is a very adult circumstance that I don't think any kid is gonna relate to. This seems more for the parents than the kids, if anything. Meanwhile, now that Goldie has the map, the world changes to fit her worldview, and her first obstacle is nostalgia. Again, something that a lot of adults, even myself included, have a hard time getting over. You see, Goldie has nostalgia for the good old days, when it was just her and her 3 bears in their cabin in the woods. And you know that the good old days are something that a lot of adults constantly yearn for. So again, this is very relatable for most adults. At first, Goldie tries to overcome the lure of nostalgia, but it eventually proves too great to overcome. Meanwhile, Jack is talking to his knockoff Jiminy Cricket, and we find out that this man's wish is literally to have all the magic in the world and that no one else has any. So again, Jiminy, or the fake Jiminy, is just like, yeah, you're just irredeemable, dude. I can't fix you. Kitty and Puss sneak into the cabin to get the map. In the midst of a scuffle, Goldie kidnaps Perrito, and Puss gets a hold of the map, and the world changes again. This is where we get Puss in the Cave of Lost Souls, where Puss sees himself everywhere as he's confronted with his own ego. Meanwhile, Goldilocks and the 3 bears set a trap with Perrito so that Puss and Kitty go after them. It's here that we get another adult joke from Perrito, where he actually starts cussing all of them out, and it comes out of nowhere, and it's actually probably one of the funniest moments in the film.
Okay, here we go. You're all a bunch of knuckle-dragging, honey-scrounging, grub oafish munching, mangy nugget.
But again, it's such an off-color kind of joke that it's like, this is definitely more for adults. Even if it's bleeped out, like, this is clearly they're aiming for a broader audience here. But of course, Kitty shows up just in time to rescue Perrito, and off they go. Meanwhile, Puss is talking to his past lives as he realizes that he was actually alone the whole time and that he was so obsessed with becoming a legend that he never let anyone else into his life. And he comes to the realization that his past self was actually a bit of a jerk. It's a pretty powerful thing to put in a so-called kids movie where your main character faces off against their own ego and they don't like what they see. Again, I'm just trying to show you how this movie is a lot deeper than I think it even gets credit for. The big bad wolf then shows up and scares Puss away, which causes Puss to run back into the forest where he eventually becomes the first to find the wishing star. Meanwhile, Goldilocks and her bears are lost. And Goldilocks finally admits that her wish is that she gets a real family, something that insults the bears. I think this is a very real moment for Goldilocks because I'm sure she really loves these bears. We've seen in the movie so far that they are family to her. She even refers to them as like mom and so forth. But even while having these bears, she's still craving having a human family. And again, that's just a very human need, which is what makes these characters so freaking relatable. But when Puss gets to the star, Kitty feels betrayed because she feels like he was just trying to get to the star without her, and they had previously agreed to share their wish. She feels especially hurt because her wish was to have someone that she could trust. And she was just beginning to think that Puss would be that person. And now that we know where all these characters' wishes are, I think the most interesting aspect of this movie is that all these characters have very human weaknesses and flaws. And so it makes these characters a lot more relatable and real. Adults could easily identify with Goldilocks' desire for family, or Puss's yearning for his glory days, or even Kitty's fear of abandonment and betrayal. These are very human flaws that most adults can relate to a lot more than kids do. Goldilocks and the three bears arrive at the star and they all go at each other. In the midst of all this fighting, Goldilocks eventually gets the map and is about to wish for her new family, but at that moment, one of her bears is in trouble and she decides that she's going to save her bear family instead of wishing for a human one, and that she forgoes her wish instead. Kitty then pushes Jack inside his own bag and Puss is the last to have the map. But of course, the bounty hunter shows up and gives him his sword back, begging for a fight. Puss starts seeing his most recent life flash before his eyes. It's here that he realizes that the real lesson that he needed to learn was the friends he made along the way. He pushes aside the map to fight the bounty hunter, and this is the first time since the beginning of the movie that Puss fights in 24 frames per second, which shows that with the power of friendship, he's now more confident to face off against him than ever. This full circle moment, by using the frame rate of Puss as a character development story technique, is so brilliant. And again, something that animation specifically can just do really, really well. And it just proves again just how great animation can be when used to its full extent. But the bounty hunter lets him live because he only wanted to go after Puss for being an egotistical maniac who thought he was immortal. And now that Puss has changed, he no longer wants to hurt him. This just shows you that the real villain of the movie the whole time was Puss's ego. Puss then hands off the map to Kitty, who wants to wish for someone she could trust. But now that she has Puss, she no longer wants that wish. Meanwhile, Jack eats the knockoff Alice in Wonderland food that makes him grow, and he's able to escape his TARDIS bag. But of course, with the power of friendship, they all are able to band together and tear apart the map so that no one can get a wish, including Jack. The movie ends with Team Friendship heading off into the horizon towards the inevitable Shrek 5. And end scene. What I love about this movie is that it actually wears its heart on its sleeve. Its characters are deeply emotional and aren't afraid of sharing their deepest fears and traumas. I think that's why this movie is speaking so much to so many people. In a world where a lot of people can be really artificial, especially thanks to social media, the appeal of this movie is that their characters seem very real and go through very real pain that I think a lot of people can relate to. Mix that with gorgeous visuals, clever animation, and heart-pumping action, and you can see why this movie is a hit. This is not a movie meant for kids. It's a movie meant for everyone. Just because it's a cartoon doesn't automatically mean it's for children. This movie deals with very real themes that a lot of adults can relate to. Kids can still watch this movie and enjoy it for its bright colors and funny gags, but things like wanting a family and feeling alone and feeling like you've lived past your prime are all very universal stories that just ground this movie in a sort of reality that I think is what really makes it truly exceptional. And I really do think that that's the reason this movie is connecting so much. And I hope that Hollywood continues making more movies like this, and that they realize that adults do like animated movies too. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is a prime example of why. But what did you guys think? Did you like this movie? Have you seen it? Did you like this video? Please let me know in the comments. Also, please make sure you like this video. It lets the algorithm know that you like it and it sends it out to more people. Also, subscribe to the channel for more reactions, reviews, commentary videos like this. I do multiple videos a week. If you like this video, you can watch more right now on my channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!